Hey, this is Joe Hubbard from JoeHubbardBassVideos.com coming at you today with another lesson. And this is the third lesson in my Polyrhythms course. Today's lesson is on the major 7th chord, so with that in mind, grab your bass and let's get started. It's important to understand that the 8th note is the rhythmic subdivision for jazz, but the polyrhythmic phrasing is created by how we group these 8th notes together. Remember that syncopation is created by displacing the accents in a rhythmic phrase where it places an emphasis on beats that were originally weak. In the Western classical system, the first of every 2 8th notes falls on a downbeat. But by accenting every third 8th note, a change occurs that opposes the placement of the basic pulse. In actual application, much of the syncopated tension against the basic pulse is resolved after 4 to 8 bars. We usually use this as a dynamic device to create an inside-outside effect. For further reference, make sure that you start listening to the recordings of the Miles Davis Quintet, most notably the Sorcerer, Miles Smiles, Nefertiti, and ESP. As this lesson will focus on the major 7th chord, let's go ahead and take a look at harmonizing the Lydian mode in triads. The Lydian mode's formula is root, 2nd, 3rd, sharp 4th, 5, 6, and 7. When harmonizing the scale in triads, we end up with this formula. From the root, we have a major triad. From the 2nd, we have another major triad. From the 3rd, we have a minor triad. From the sharp 4, we have a diminished triad. From the 5th, we have a major triad. From the 6th, we have a minor triad. From the 7th, we have another minor triad. And then we're back to the root an octave above, and that is going to be a major triad. Remember to practice this slowly. Count out loud. This is critical when learning how to feel these polyrhythmic phrases correctly. The first thing we want to take a look at is harmonizing the Lydian mode in ascending triads and going up and back down our fretboard. Before we jump into that straight away, let's just go over this Lydian mode one more time. It starts off on the root, and I've got the root, the 2nd, the 3rd, the sharp 4, the 5, the 6, the 7, and then the root on the top. The important thing about this scale in relation to the major 7th chord is it contains all of the chord tones of a major 7th chord along with all of the available chord tensions that are associated with the major 7th chord, which are 9, sharp 11, and 13. So having all these notes in that scale, you can resolve to every note. Now, we don't want to just play scales up and down. That's not our agenda here. But what we do want to do is come up with methodology that allows us to create interesting and melodic lines. And what's very cool about this is that I can then resolve to any one of these notes in any of these ascending triads along the way over a major 7th chord. Once we start combining this with these polyrhythmic drills, it creates a whole different vibe because, it really engages the listener with all the various aspects of melody, harmony, rhythm. It creates counterpoint, and you're applying this over various song forms. So just that in itself is hitting every single component in Western music. So this is what we're looking to do to create interest and engage that listener's ears. So what happens is that now that we know the scale, what we want to do is harmonize it. Remember, there's a formula to harmonizing this scale. It starts off with a major triad from the root. From the 2nd degree, I've got another major triad. From the 3rd degree, I have a minor triad. From the sharp 4, I have a diminished triad. From the 5th, I have a major triad. From the 6th, I have a minor triad. From the 7th, I have another minor triad. And now I'm up to the root again, an octave above. That takes me back to a major triad. So all of the triads ascending is going to look like this. this. So now I've got this complete harmonization of the Lydian mode, and what's great about this is that depending upon the way that I play these triads, and of course the way that we're going to start working with these polyrhythmic drills is subtracting the roots, the thirds, and the fifths, and it's going to create all these different linear possibilities that we have. The great thing is that I can rest assured that I can resolve to any one of these notes that I'm playing because they're all available globally over a major seventh chord, including the chord tones and the available tension. So that's very cool as a concept. So what we need to do is we need to count this. So if I go, take it rather slow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That takes me into my 8-bar phrase. Notice how I tag this to 2 bars on the end. I want to start hearing these in application in 4-bar phrases and 8-bar phrases. That's the way you're going to use it. That's the way you're going to hear it being used in things. So start listening out for that. So maybe a little bit slower. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, get this down. Do it in every key. Really get familiar with the way this feels over a major seventh chord. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back and we're going to start to systematically subtracting the roots, the thirds, and the fifths to create these different polyrhythmic ideas where the rhythms are displaced through the bar. But what it's doing throughout is maintaining that accenting of the first note of every 3/8 notes. So everything's grouped in accents of 3/8 notes rather than grouped in accents of 2 where it feels like everything's either on the downbeat or the upbeat. So this is really the way that jazz rhythmically is different from pop, rock, and classical music. And there's a lot of people that start playing jazz and they don't know this. They might have some of the melodic and harmonic content, but without the rhythmic content, it doesn't quite sound right. So get this together, have fun with this over the backing track, but be sure to do it in every key. Come back and we'll start this process of subtraction. In this first evolution, what we're going to take a look at is subtracting the roots from each one of these ascending triads within the Lydian mode. So if we isolate each triad and go through it, subtract the roots and find out what we're left with, gives us an idea of the skeleton of the drill. So if I take the C major triad, I subtract the root, I end up with the E and the G, which is the third and the fifth. And that creates a diatonic third within the scale. If I then go to the next chord, which is the D major triad, subtract the root, I'm going to end up with the third and the fifth, or the F sharp and the A. That creates another diatonic third. And so it goes up the scale. So if I continue that and I go E minor, subtract the root, now I've got G and B. If I go to F sharp diminished, subtract the root, I have A and C. to G major, then subtract the root, which is G, I'm left with B and D. If I go to A minor, subtract the root, which is A, I'm left with C and E. If I go to B minor, subtract the root, which is B, I'm left with D and F sharp. And then I'm up to C major, subtract the root, and I'm left with the E and the G. So the idea with subtracting the root in the, just if I play it as ascending triads, that first root falls on the downbeat. So in this exercise, the exercise can actually start on the upbeat. So what happens is that as I'm counting it, it's going to go 1. That's how it starts. And remember that I'm starting on the actual third of the first triad, which is a C major triad. And that gives you an indication of how to do this. Now, as you're playing through this, what you really want to be doing is understanding how these notes relate to a C major 7 chord. I mean, you want to understand the implications of when I play this, that this is the sharp 11 and this is the 13 over that chord. The more that you can get into doing that, the better for your application and learning to play what you hear. So in your practice, you have to really go through that sort of process. It's incredibly important. What a lot of people do is they just learn the patterns, that they're diatonic thirds, and that's it. That's not good enough. You've got to learn the actual application of the notes and how they relate over the actual chord. So what happens here is that if I count this, I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's back that up a bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, get this together. Do it in every key. It is kind of simple enough because they're diatonic thirds, but I really want you to start to understand that wherever you are, you know, what are the functions of these notes when you're playing around, so you understand. Yeah, I've got that sharp 11 to the 9, and you know, this does so much for the way that you can hear an idea in your head and then translate that straight to your instrument. Without that, you're always going to have a hard time, and it's always going to seem like you'll have to come up with these pre-conditioned, homogenized things to play as licks, and then that's the way you play from a more motor reflex. What I want to get you to do is to play more from an audible reflex, then translate that through the motor reflex. And that's the difference of what we're talking about here. So get this together, practice this in every key, do it with the backing track, come back, and then we're going to sort of embark on subtracting thirds. In this next exercise, what we're going to take a look at is subtracting all of the thirds from each one of the ascending triads. So let's isolate each triad, let's take away the third, and let's see what we're left with. So we take the first one, which is C major. I take away the middle note, which is the third, and I'm left with the root in the fifth, or in the case of C major, then go to D major. Take away that middle note, I'm left with D and A, or the root in the fifth. Go to E minor. Take away the middle note, which is G, I'm left with the root in the fifth here. F sharp diminished. Take away the third, which is that middle note, which is the A, I'm left with the root, and this is a flatted fifth. This is the only one where we have a flatted fifth relationship between that F sharp and C. Okay? Then the next one is G major. Take away that middle note, I'm left with the root in the fifth. A minor. Take away the middle note, which is C, I'm left with A and E, which is root in fifth. B minor. Take away the middle note, which is D, I'm left with B and F sharp, which is root in fifth. And then I'm back up to the C major, take away the third, and I've got the root and the fifth of the C and the G. So what happens, even though they are root and fifths, because the rhythm is phrased like this, it's easier to think of these as descending fourths once I've played the first note. Descending fourth here, descending fourth, descending fourth, descending fourth, descending fourth, descending fourth, descending fourth. It's an augmented fourth. And then brings it back up to the root here. Okay? So the way that line goes, if I start to count it, is this. And I'm just going to do the ascending part first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Now when I start to come back down this, again, we're just descending down, because from here, this was my root and my fifth of the C. Now I'm coming back down with the B, with the A, with that G, F sharp, with the E, with the D, and then ultimately back to that C. But again, because of the rhythmic displacement is odd, it's kind of feels when you come back down that you're really doing descending sixth. So as I'm here and coming back from, I've hit that C up to here, the next note is B, that's down a descending sixth. And that's kind of how that is. So perception-wise, it could be easier to think of that as descending sixths rather than you're ascending up, down through the fifths, as it actually is. But the way you perceive it because of the rhythm, it's kind of easier to look at it that way. So experiment with that. You might find it, if you just think of the fifths the whole way through, that's fine. But because of the rhythm placement, this is what I've come up with, and a lot of students have thought that was very useful for them and helpful to get this exercise down. So again, if we do the counting of this, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me roll that back slightly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, get this together. All keys, play it over the backing track. Really work these fingerings out slowly. This is the one that's going to be problematic if there is really one that is going to cause you some issues. It's going to be these thirds because of these intervallic shapes. But how cool they are will surpass any sort of anguish that you have by getting this together. So work on these, get them together, come back, and we'll start to subtract the fifths. In this exercise, what we're going to do is subtract the fifths from all those ascending triads. So let's take a look at each one, subtract the fifth, and look at what we're left over with. So what we've got is the C major triad. I subtract the fifth, which is the top note. Okay, so taking away that fifth, and what happens is I end up with the root and the third. So if I do this successively with all of these chords, take that top note away, I've got the root and the third of each one of these chords. So there's the D major one. Okay, taking the E minor one, take away the top note, I'm left with the root and the third. If I go to the F sharp diminished, take away the top note, left with the root and the third. G major, take away the top note, I'm left with the root and the third. A minor, take away the top note, I'm left with the root and the third. B minor, take away the top note, I'm left with the root and the third. C major, take away the top note, I'm left with the root and the third. Now with that B minor, what I'm going to do is realign my fingering for this. So as I go up these thirds, play that here rather than here, and then I've got the whole exercise in one position. So that's a good thing, you know, in a sense with these, and it'll help you focus on the rhythm a little bit more. So this is, because we're starting on the root, it's going to start on the downbeat. So this is going to go like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So get that down in every key. Let's do that a little slower. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, go away, practice this, get in the shed, learn it in every key, play it with the backing track, come back, and what we're going to start to do is the whole thing in reverse. So we're going to take the Lydian mode and we're going to harmonize it in triads but descending, and then systematically start to subtract all the chord tones, and we're going to come up with just such a variety of melodic and harmonic and rhythmic content that it's, you know, you're now going to be able to start applying these over 2-5-1 progressions and stuff, because you now got the minor 7, dominant 7, and this is the major. So this is going to be very cool. I want you to really start listening acutely on recordings for these ideas, because they're all over modern jazz, all the way tracing back from the bebop area to modern day. Check it out, come back, we'll do the next thing. exercises, what we're going to take a look at is harmonizing the Lydian mode in descending diatonic triads. So we're going to turn the whole thing upside down and work with this. So if I have that major triad from the root, then the major triad from the second degree, minor from the third, diminished from the sharp 4, major from the 5, minor from the 6, minor from the 7, major from the root. I'm going to come back down, minor from the 7th, minor from the 6th, major from the 5, diminished from the sharp 4, minor from the 3rd, major from the 2nd, major from the root. So playing that successively, I'm going to have this. Again, we've got to count this, so it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we've got there is that whole idea, playing a little quicker, playing a little slower. Slow it right down. You'll find that when you slow it right down, it's really, you start to really hear the implications of those accents of every 3/8 notes. This is really important because this is characteristic of the jazz language, and you need to start to really slow it down, then try to play it a little bit quicker, slow it back down, try to play a little bit quicker, so you can hear those ideas and the placement of those notes. And it's very cool once you start getting that connection between your count and playing those exercises. Because just playing the triads, if I played them in triplets, it would sound corny. But by playing them this way, it gives me an edge. So what I want you to do is practice this over the backing track, get it down in every key, come back, and we're going to systematically start subtracting the roots, the thirds, and the fifths from these descending sets. This next exercise, what we're going to do is subtract all of the roots from the descending triads of the Lydian mode. So if we isolate each one and then subtract the root and see what we're left with, we can then build this line accordingly. So what I've got is a descending major triad on the root. Okay, I subtract the root of that chord, which is C, and I'm left with G and E, or the 5 and the 3. And that creates a descending minor third interval. Okay, as I then go up to the second degree, play the chord, which is a D major triad, subtract the D, which is the root, I'm left with the A and the F sharp. This gives me another descending minor third. So then if I take the next chord, which is an E minor, subtract the root, which is E, I'm left with B and G. This is a major third. If I then take the next chord, which is a descending F sharp diminished, take out the root, which is F sharp, I'm left with C and A, which is a descending minor third. The next chord is G major, subtract the root, I'm left. This gives me a descending minor third. Then the next chord is going to be A minor, subtract the root, and I'm left with E and C. That gives me a descending major third. The next chord is a B minor, subtract the root, and I'm left with F sharp and D. That's another major third. And then the last chord is the C major. Take away the root, and I'm left with a G and an E, and that's a descending minor third. So what happens is that it's all going to be diatonic thirds descending now, and I'm starting from the fifth of the actual chord. So what also happens is, because these are descending triads, that fifth is on the downbeat of the first bar. So if you looked at the previous exercise where we had the ascending triads, where we subtracted the roots, it started on the upbeat because the root was on the downbeat and we took that away. So that's how these displacements kind of occur. So you got to kind of keep your eye out for that. So here this starts on the downbeat. So I've got count to that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Real slow. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Get this down in every key. These are all challenging. Now that you're building it up to where you got it over the minor 7, the dominant, and the major, information is starting to compile a bit. But really focusing on these exercises is going to make a big difference in your playing, because it's going to add in that rhythmic language from jazz that most people don't have. A lot of people play melodically and harmonically jazz ideas, but they play them with a classical or a rock or a pop rhythm bass, and it doesn't sound right. So really get into this and understand where this is coming from. Practice it in all keys, have fun with the backing track, come back, and then we're going to start to embark on subtracting the thirds. In this next exercise, what we're going to take a look at is subtracting the thirds from each of these descending triads from the Lydian mode. So let's isolate each triad. So I've got on the first degree the descending major triad. If I subtract the thirds, I'm going to end up with descending fifths. Okay, so 5 goes to 1, or G goes to C. Okay, if I then take that next triad, which is D major, and I subtract the middle note, this is the third, is in the middle. And the result when we play the rhythm is it doesn't change from the ascending one like the other two exercises displace. This one stays the same rhythmically because the middle note is what's removed, so remember that. So the idea is that I take away that middle note and I'm left with the fifth down to the root, okay, the E minor. I take away that middle note, so I'm left with that fifth down to the root. The descending, diminished triad from F sharp. I take away the middle note, which is the A. I'm left with this descending, diminished fifth interval. Okay, this is where you see this diminished fifth thing happening. Okay, and then what happens is that I go to the next chord, which is G major. Take out the middle note. I end up with that 5 down to the 1, or the D down to the G. I've got A minor. Take out that middle note, which is C. I end up with E going down to A, or the 5 down to the root. I then go up to the B minor. I take out that middle note, which is D, and I end up with F sharp to B, or 5 to 1. And then I'm back to my C major, take out the middle note, and I end up with that 5 down to the 1 there, the G down to the C. So what we have here again is this 5 to 1 concept, where before we had 1 to 5, now we have 5 to 1. But again, because of the displacement of the rhythm in this exercise, when I go up the fretboard, once I play the first note, it's good to look at this in ascending 6, because this is how this goes. So it goes like this. So right there, I've got the whole exercise ascending. I'll play that to you one more time. It comes back down to that C, but that's where the second part starts to happen here, okay? So when the second part happens, again, you know, I've already played down, descending down to that C, 5 to 1. So it's going to go 5 to 1 on the B, 5 to 1 on the A, 5 to 1 on the G, 5 to 1 on the F sharp, 5 to 1 on the E, 5 to 1 on that D, and then I'm back to 5 to 1 on the C. So the deal is, though, again, it's the way it's phrased, because if I'm here, I'm going like this. And because of that, as I descend, it looks like past that first note, which is then just part of that whole rhythmic matrix, that enigma, you know, wrapped in a riddle type of rhythm, is that when I go back to that C, I'm going from here, and these are all look like fourths, all the way back down to the end of the exercise. So again, it's a perception thing of how you look at it. I take this really slow and try this a few various ways. A lot of people who have explained and broken it down this way instantly understand what to do, and it's the way of looking at it because of the way the rhythm is placed. So let's count it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Go through this really slowly. This is a tough one. Do it in every key. Get with the backing track. Play along with that. Come back. We're now going to start to get into the last exercise, which is subtracting the fifths. And you know, this is very, very exciting that we've got all these 3 chords, and we can start to kind of look at how we could put this over like some 2-5-1 ideas, or see where it crops up within improvisations from, you know, the masters. And that's what you want to start to really look into. Okay, can't be an exercise forever. It needs to start to have some kind of connection, you know. Those tentacles have to kind of spread and connect out with the actual source, which is the music. So start listening to all that Miles Davis quintet stuff. Come back and we'll do the fifths. So what we're going to do in this last exercise is subtract the fifths from each one of these diatonic descending triads from the Lydian mode. So if I take each triad, take the descending C major from the root of the scale, and we subtract the top note, which is the fifth, I'm going to end up with the third going down to the root. I take the second chord, which is D major, subtract the top note, which is the fifth, and I'm going to end up with the third going down to the root. As I move up successively, that's exactly what's going to happen. By removing the fifth for every single one of these triads, I'm going to end up with the third resolving down to the root. So I have my E minor triad, end up with the third resolving to the root. I have the F sharp diminished triad, take away the fifth, I end up with the third resolving to the root. I have the G major triad, take away the fifth on the top, I end up with the third resolving to the root. I have the A minor triad, take away the top note, I end up with the third resolving to the root. I have the B minor triad, take away that top note, I end up with the third resolving to the root. I'm going to change my position here so it's like this, so I can play the whole exercise positionally. So then the next chord is C major, take away the top note, I end up with the third resolving to the root. And you see that decision to do that with the B minor. I can cop that here, I cop the C major one here. So it's basically diatonic descending thirds, and I'm starting on the third of the first chord. So the idea with this is that we are, because the fifth was on the downbeat and that's been removed, this one starts on the upbeat. So it's like this. So if I then put a count to that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, take this away with you, get it together, all keys, start working on your tempos, do various tempos. Again, don't practice with a metronome, just do it by yourself. Maybe use the metronome to select BPM, but really get this down in various tempos. A lot of it will be determined by your technique, but just stay with it. Really persevere and get that count. Make sure you're counting out loud with these. If you aren't doing that, then you're not doing these exercises correctly. You're not going to get the full maximum benefit. Does it take a little effort and time? Is it hard? Yes to all of the above. But once you break through those barriers, this information will skyrocket your performance like you've never seen before. So make sure that you really do these correctly. Okay, I'm going to play along with the thing now. You can check that out. Have fun doing that, but make sure you take it through all the keys. Come back later and we'll do a bit of a debrief. That just about wraps up today's lesson, but before we go, let's take a look at what we've learned. At the end of today's lesson, we've learned a detailed methodology for understanding polyrhythms over major seventh chords. We've also learned how to phrase lines rhythmically for added interest in your bass lines and your solos. We then took a look at an easy system for understanding how to count and feel polyrhythmic and syncopated phrases correctly. As always, practice smart, work hard, and play creatively. I'll be checking in with you next week for Lesson 4, so until then, take care.